that fungi, you may know that fungi used to be included in the plant kingdom, so they were considered more closely related to plants than animals.
Mm-hmm.
But once we started extracting DNA and looking at the similarities and the rate at which they evolve and certain things that happen to the different regions of DNA, like insertions and deletions and transversions and so forth, certain things happen to the DNA in an organism, in an ancestor, and then that gets passed down to the progeny, to the rest of the lineage. And it turns out that once you really start looking into it with DNA, fungi are more closely related to animals than they are to plants. So they, now they're in their own kingdom. But if you want to say, well, that's the reason why fungi affect humans in a very profound way, I don't think that's exactly accurate. It's more like that we have learned to recognize them because they're very strong potential pathogens. And our immune system had turned a type of microorganism out there, bacteria, yeast, fungi, and so forth. And then we have to find a balance with it. So as we know, we have a microflora, a biome that consists of trillions of bacteria and other organisms. That's an integral part of our body and our functioning. And we wouldn't be very healthy without it. We couldn't survive without it, probably. And so there's a lot of interactions going on with our immune system, with the yeast and also fungi. So when we ingest, take some reishi or shiitake and cook it up, and there's a lot of interactions going on with our immune system. And it's a very ancient recognition, and it's a very ancient interaction. And so our body says, well, this is a fungi, this is a potential pathogen. So it starts amping up and orchestrating different types of immune functions and processes. And because of that, it's pretty profound what ingesting mushrooms can do, the interact with our immune system and the rest of our body. But I don't think it's because we're closely related. It's because we're not the same. That's why it's affecting our bodies in such a profound way. We have to sample everything out there, and our immune system is incredibly ancient and complex. And these interactions are just, we understand them to a certain degree, and there's a lot out there to understand it in its full profundity, you might put it that way. It's very profound the way we're connected to the natural world, obviously, and we're part of it. And so these interactions are very intricate and fascinating. But the bottom line is we really orchestrates a lot of interesting immune processes once we ingest or are exposed to a fungi of any type, including molds and yeast. They're also fungi.
Okay, so then what role do beta-glucans play in that picture?
Well, beta-glucans are first of all, they're complex carbohydrates, large chains of carbohydrates, and they're highly branched. So these are heteropolysaccharides, but beta-glucans are put together in a certain way, and they also have a tertiary structure. They're in a form of a helix, and so they're an integral part of the cell wall of all fungi and yeasts. So up to about 55% of reishi cells are beta-glucans, up to 55%. So that's a huge percentage of the weight of the fungi cell. And so because the beta-glucans are very complex, and they're also on the outside of the cell, they're very good markers for what the organism is, the identity of the organism. So it stands in as a picture or an identity of what the organism is all about. And so our immune system has many, many receptor sites. Remember that 60% of our immune tissue is in our gut. So when we swallow, say, a shiitake, we cook it up for a stir fry like I did last night and put it with some greens and eat it, then it traverses the whole gut, and there's all kinds of recognition going on in different types of receptor sites that are very ancient in our gut. And so we can say our immune system says, well, this is a foreign, beta glucan, and it activates dectin, and it activates other types of immune receptor sites, and then all kinds of things happen. Not only that, but our macrophages, which are the big cell eaters, part of our immune system, engulf some of those cell wall components and take it inside the body and digest it and display the pieces of those beta glucans on the outside of their cell wall, so that other immune systems like T cells, B cells, and so forth can see that, can interact with that, and then they go off and amplify their activity or ratchet it up and start killing. So our immune system becomes upregulated in certain ways based on being exposed to these pieces of beta glucan that our body recognizes as it traverses through our gut, and also the macrophages take it inside of our body and distribute it around our body to really delve into it deeply. It's frankly astounding the way that it works.
It is amazing. It truly is. So recently I've been teaching just a little series, just the basics of some medicinal mushrooms, and Chaga was our most recent class. And as I was doing some digging around about Chaga, I found that it was probably the medicinal mushroom with the most controversy about it. In other words, it seemed like there was a lot of misinformation about it. And of course, that's always a risk when you're looking up information on the internet, especially from sort of health gurus who are just grabbing and passing around myths. So I couldn't get to the bottom of everything myself, and I was hoping that you would clarify a few things for us. Like, for example, it seems like one of the misinformation that is abounding about Chaga is that Chaga actually has a symbiotic relationship with the birch tree that it usually grows on, and that it heals its wound, when in fact that is not the case. Is that correct?
Well, I've been a big proponent, especially after going through graduate school, that when you think about the relationship of different types of organisms, is it a symbiosis, or is it another type of relationship where it's a parasitic relationship, for instance? And when you look at the bigger picture, it's pretty clear to me that every relationship is a symbiotic relationship, because, and that may be somewhat controversial to say that, but in the sense of that organisms are exquisitely tuned to the other types of organisms. They're placed in the ecology, in the gestalt of wherever they're living, and even planetary wise. And so if a chaga is growing inside of a birch tree, is it parasitic in the sense that it's going to attack a healthy birch tree and then destroy it, or eat it up, dissolve it, release carbon for other organisms through all these powerful enzymes that they have? So is it really kind of like a parasite, or is it somehow cooperating or working in harmony with the birch population? For instance, when you think about the best example I always use is the caribou. So if they're in the mistletoe, if the mistletoe will, and in Davis, where I used to live, you have these big, huge, massive black walnuts all along one of the boulevards, and they were covered with mistletoe. And during the drought years, we had 4 or 5 drought years recently, the mistletoe started growing more and more, and the black walnuts started dying. And so, you know, you could look at it and say, well, the mistletoe is killing the black walnut, but really, you could also think of it in the sense that the weak ones are, their immune system has been weakened, and so if they are to cross and create new, you know, little black walnuts and sprout and start a new tree, well, that tree has been weakened, so that it's going to be taken out of the gene pool, basically. And it's the same with birch. If the chaga is part of the birch, I mean, it's like kind of like it's like the microbiome of the birch. We think of our own microbiome, all these bacteria, but the birch also has a microbiome. And every plant out there has a microbiome. They're called endophytes, and they grow inside the leaf. So if you take a leaf of a echinacea and you culture it, blend it up and then culture it on agar, you will find that there are bacteria in there living inside the leaf. So the plant has a microbiome as well. That's an important part of its immune process and its living process. So the chaga is it's an integral part of the birch community, and it's entirely beneficial to the ecology and the gestalt of the birch forest, because and you'll see it growing out of a wound. Here's a chaga right here. Here's a nice chaga and you can see how it was rooted into the tree here. This yellow supposedly is betulinic acid. We've tested it, and it seems to be all betulinic acid coming from the tree. So this one is about 15 or 20 years old, and they look the same as it did. And this turns out that this one came out of Rosemary Gledstar's forest up in Vermont. And so you can see that there was a cleft or a wound in the tree here, and this we call it it's not really, this isn't the fruiting body. Probably people know that. So it's not a fruiting body. It's a creation that forms, I believe, to protect the tree, to seal it like a scab almost. What other function would it have? I mean, the fruiting body that produces the spores is a little tiny fruiting body that comes out once in a while and then produces spores, and then that's how it transmits itself in the forest. But this is simply, you know, a creation that's very, very hard and brittle, and it has some of the properties of the tree. It has betulinic acid and other things from the substrate, and it also produces things that come from fungus. So I do believe that it is there are benefits to the birch forest and the birch population, and even the individual tree. And otherwise, how do you explain why the fungus, which is growing inside the tree, produces this hard body that comes out of the tree? What other function would it have in the whole gestalt of the ecology there? So I believe it, yes, it does have a beneficial effect. And I'm very much of you might say, I want to look at the whole picture, I want to look at the whole web, and I don't want to isolate any one particular part. We're not separate from the web of the forest either, but our big brain has kind of taken us out of it, but we're still rooted in it, we're still integrally connected to it. And that's why it's good to spend time in the forest, because it reminds ourselves and our body and our spirit, our energetics, it kind of connects with who we are really as humans, as animals.